Hello, welcome back. This is Paulie Abides, and today we're going to take a look at drum sampling in Reaper. I said I'd do a bit of a demonstration about how I use Reaper's sampler to chop up drums and set them onto the MIDI keyboard for MIDI sequencing. So this is that video. So without further ado, let's jump into Reaper and take a look at how that's done. So we are in Reaper now, and Reaper's sampler is called Reaper Sampler-Matic 5000. You can find that in the FX section in the samplers folder. Here we are, Reaper Sampler-Matic 5000, and it's a simple sampler that looks like this. It's a little bit like Ableton's Simpler in a way. It's a fairly straightforward sampler. You've got your expected ADSR envelope, attack, decay and release up top here. You've got volume, which we'll come to in a bit. This helps you set the velocity of the sample. You've got the note start and end settings, which allows you to set the sample to a key on the keyboard. You've got pitch on here, which is quite useful. I use this a lot. We've got obey note offs, which I'll demonstrate shortly, and we've got a number of voices for the sample as well. So for drum sampling, what I tend to do is, if I bring in a sample from the Media Explorer, such as the action break from Orange Crush, as used by Optical in To Shape the Future. What we can do is I'll show you how I tend to chop up breaks and put them into the sampler. Now I've actually just overwritten my sampler channel, so let me set that up again on a different channel. So Reaper has this effects section, and it's like a kind of container, really. So you can have many things in this container at the same time. And Ableton's Drum Rack is a little bit like that, because it essentially has many simplers or samplers across every key of the keyboard. And you can do that with this system here. So at the moment I've just got one sampler set up within this container, but what I want to do is have every hit of this drum break assigned to a key on the keyboard. And so the way that's done, well, first of all I'm going to chop up the break, and we'll come back to the sampler in a minute. So let's have a look at the break. So the break is you've got a kick, and using the S key I will chop it where I think it should be chopped. Might zoom in a bit. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hits. So that means I'm going to need 5 samplers to accommodate that. So what I'll do is I'll duplicate this sampler 4 more times. So I'll just do Control C, then Control V. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then to get the sound from here into here, I can use the import item from arrange button. So if I click on that and do import, go to the next sound and then the next sampler and do the same. Next sound, next sampler, import item from arrange, next sound, next sampler, import item from arrange, and same again on the next one. and it looks like I need one more sampler, so I'll just add that in for the final sound. Okay, so that's all of the sounds added, and if I turn my MIDI input on for this channel, so I'm hearing sound, but they're all playing at the same time. So I need to get all of these sounds assigned to a key on the keyboard. And so yeah, one of the reasons why I love Reaper is because it reminds me very much of how this was done back in the day with traditional samplers. I used to have the EMU E6400 Ultra connected by SCSI, and I would have sounds being chopped up in SoundForge and then sent to the sampler over the SCSI lead, and you would have to kind of configure each note to be set up for each sound that you wanted on that keyboard stretch. And that's kind of how this works in here. So we've got our samplers, and at the moment they're playing every note at the same time. So how do we set it up so that it only plays for the key that you want it to play? Okay, so at the moment I'm on the kick drum, and I've got my C key just underneath my finger here. If I press the C key and then double click on note start, it will set up the note start and end to be that key, and I've pressed C1 in this case. So I'll go on to the next key and the next sound. I will press the next MIDI key that I want, which is C sharp, and then double click the note start button again, and that has now changed it to C sharp. And I'll do the same on the next sound. So this sound will be on D, so I'll press D and then double click the note start button, and that has changed to D1. Next sound and next key. So the next key is D sharp, so I'll press that and then double click note start, and that's taken D sharp. Next sound, and we're on to E, so I'll press E and then double click note start, and then the final sound I'll do F, and there we are. So that is now set to F. So now I've got each sound assigned to a key, so that's let's play that again. So now I've got a MIDI instrument with my drum break assigned to all of the keys on my keyboard. So I can now play an arrangement that's different from the original beat, which is great. Okay, so what's next? So with the Ableton, when you stretch it to a MIDI track, or rather when you slice to a MIDI track, this is all done for you. And one of the nice things about that isn't in here is the note choke feature. So when one note plays, the other one does not play. That's not the case here. They all do play if you hit all of the keys at the same time, which is not really ideal for MIDI drum programming. So what I tend to do for that is I have the max voices set to 1 for each of them. So I'll just stretch that down to 1 for each sound. So that means only one voice will happen for each note. And also there is a note off button here as well. So obey note offs I'm going to tick that for each sound. So now when I release the key, it only plays for the duration that the key is held down. And that's not quite the same as a MIDI choke feature, but it's good enough because it means that when I program my MIDI sequence, the notes, as long as I make sure that they don't overlap, they won't kind of go over each other. Okay, so that's the basics of it. Now, what about velocity? So at the moment, when I press a key, no matter how hard I press it, it will be the same volume. But to have velocity activated, you need to use the min vol option here, and you need to drag it all the way down to the bottom for each sound. Okay. So now you've got a velocity activated note. The harder you press it, the louder it will be. Okay. We also have pitch here as well, which is quite useful, and I use pitch quite a lot. It's called pitch offset on this sampler, and it gives you a very wide pitch range to go through. Now, how do we actually use that with all of this stuff, all of these sounds? So there is quite a nice feature that has been created by the Reaper blog, which is available to download within Reaper. Let me see if I can remember what that's called. I've actually got another one of these pre-made that I'm going to show you in a moment, but I need to just look at it for reference. That's it, it's the utility. Let's go back to my one. Yeah, it's the Reaper blog utility. So I'm going to add that to my drum rack, and this gives you a set of faders, which is quite cool. So what I do is go to each sound, then touch the pitch offset button, go to parameters, and then parameter modulation MIDI link, and then link from MIDI or effects parameter, and then choose the macro controller at the bottom here for pitch, and then I'll do that for each of them. Oh, gotta make sure I choose the right thing. Right, so now in theory all of these sounds are now linked to this macro. And you can see the pitch offset is moving as I move the slider. Which is very cool. So I can now use that in my track to add a bit of flair at the end of bars and stuff. So like that. And I also use this with EQ. So if you think of this as like the Ableton Drum Rack, you can add in plugins into here as well. So I'll click on Add into here. Actually, I'll just get rid of those first. Yeah, so Add, and then I will add in an EQ. Such as this one, and maybe do a high pass filter, or a low cut rather. Maybe quite a steep one, literally for an effect. Yeah, so that's okay. So we've got our high pass filter in. If I wiggle that and then go to parameter modulation MIDI link from MIDI or effects parameter, go down to my Reaper blog macro controller, choose macro 2, and then close that. So now when I'm playing something, I can use macro 2. It's not quite working for some reason. Let me check why. Ah, okay, so it's the wrong value. So let's undo that. So actually the value I wanted is this one. So that little lip is quite good, but it's the band frequency we want to link. Right, so let's do parameter modulation MIDI link from MIDI or effects parameter, macro controller macro 2. So now I can control pitch and the high pass filter with these macros, which is really useful. Okay, so in a nutshell, that is how I do drums in Reaper using the built-in Rear Sampler-Matic 5000. But how can we go one further than this? How can we make it a bit easier to do? Because all of that was quite a lot of messing around, a lot of fiddling and stuff, and you don't want to have to do that every time you want to chop up a breakbeat. So one of the ways I've done that is, let's say if I delete what we just made, if I right click where you add a track, insert track from template, I've actually got like breaks already saved here, because you can save them as templates, but you can also save an empty drum rack, and this is what I've done. I've called this one Represent because the EQ on it is a little bit like the ones that Ronnie Sar's Represent used to use. So this is a Reaper EQ. If I, let's say, if I, how can I float this container? Yeah, let's do that. If I show you the EQ curve, I've got it set like this. So again, it's another high pass filter, but it's got a really steep resonance filter on it. And what we have here is a load of empty empty samplers that are just waiting for drums to be placed into them. And if you notice, they're already assigned to keys like so. So all I have to do is, once I've chopped my break, click on import item from arrange. And then if I put my MIDI on, I've got the same as we had before, but this was already pre-made, ready for me to use. And that's the resonant filter. So how would you go about making an empty drum rack like that? Well, I can show you how that's done. So if I close that and open up a new channel and go to, let's see, sampler, I put an empty sampler in, I click effects, I get to the container part. All I need to do is actually set up the first sampler partially. So if I first of all bring the volume right down so that we get the velocity activation, I will click Obey Note Offs and bring the max voices down to 1. That's the kind of baseline position that you want for all samplers to be in. Then I will do Control C and then do Control V a bunch of times. So I've got about, say, 24 of these, which would be 2 octaves. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So there's 24 octaves. So now I need to do the note configuration. So if I do, so I will press the key on my MIDI keyboard that I want to have as my starting position. Okay, so need to make sure the right MIDI track is selected. So unselect that one, arm this one, choose my MIDI keyboard. Right, so this time press the key and then double click note start, and it's got C1. And then next key, next sound, double click, 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 and so on. So that was E. So we want to go F next. And I'll just go through and do all of these. Okay, so that's every key all the way through, in theory. Yeah, I've actually messed one up, but that's no big deal. You get the idea. So each note, each sampler now has been assigned to a note on the keyboard. And then I'll add in an EQ. Let's maybe try one of the rear EQs. Where are we now? Let's do a search for EQ. Yeah, this is the rear EQ. I like this one. And we'll add in the utility as well. Okay, so now we've got a partially set up drum rack. So to use the utility, what will need to happen is each sampler will need to have the variable linked to the macro in the utility, if that makes sense. So if I do, what I'll need to do is I'll need to move the pitch because I want to use pitch. So I'll move pitch, link it to the macro, and again do the same for each sound. And that way, once you've gone through each of these, you've got your entire drum rack configured. So whenever, if I float that, for example, whenever you move your macro, you're now moving the pitch for every single sampler within the drum rack. Okay, and then how to save that as a template? Well, all you need to do is click on, or right click on your track and do save track as track template and give it a name. So maybe empty drum rack. Then when you, let's get rid of that, and then when you start a new project, right click to add a track, but insert from track template and then do empty drum rack, and then you've got back everything that you were working on before, so you don't have to reconfigure all of that again. You can just click and import each of your sounds like so. That's it, and then it's all nicely laid out across the keys. And you've got your pitch and EQ already set up. Okay, then once you've actually started to save drum sounds into these racks, you can then right click and save it as a break. So if I do save track as track template, I could call this, I'll save it in my breaks folder. I'll do it action demo because it's the action break. But yeah, you can recall all your breaks then going forward. So if I do insert track from template, you now get these folders that you can choose from. So I could choose an amen break, for example, and it will be set up in the same way that that was before. If that makes sense. Okay, all right, so yeah, I did run through quite a lot of stuff there. Hopefully that was useful. I've got more stuff happening soon, more plans for what to do with my kind of music. I've got a few more ideas that I'd like to do with break editing, so I think that's probably what's going to happen next. We'll concentrate much more on the sort of editing of breaks and bass and stuff. So yeah, so watch this space.